Imagine you were a 26-year-old architect. You were living this highly structured, intensely urban life in London.
Right. Very controlled.
Exactly. Your days are just spent building these precise scaled models in a pristine, climate-controlled office where, every single variable is managed. And then suddenly, you inherit a sprawling 40-year-old lavender farm out in Norfolk from an aunt you barely even knew.
Talk about a culture shock, right?
Oh, totally. You have no business plan. You have no agricultural tools. You literally have zero farming knowledge. You just pack a bag, grab your architectural sketchbooks, and show up at the farm gate.
It's a complete collision of two entirely different worlds. I mean, you are taking a mind that is trained in top-down theoretical design and just dropping it into an environment that absolutely demands bottom-up physical interaction.
Yeah, and that is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking this remarkable story, which is extracted from a meticulously detailed narrative about Marsh Farm and its new owner, Ivy Weston, and we're using it as a lens.
It's such a fascinating case study.
It really is. For you, the listener, this story is a shortcut to understanding some incredibly complex realities. We are going to explore the limits of intellectual learning, the literal neuroscience of human memory, and this crazy mental model regarding systems thinking and productivity that completely redefines what we consider wasted space.
And the transition Ivy goes through is, well, it's something anyone stepping into a new field or, a new phase of life experiences, because the very first thing she hits at this farm is a wall.
A wall.
Yeah, but not a physical wall, it's a sensory one.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because intellectually, she knows she is arriving at a lavender farm. I mean, she had seen photographs of her Aunt Elena at the farm over the years, but an intellectual understanding is just completely useless the second she steps out of the car.
Right, because photos are just data. They don't have weight.
Exactly. The photographs were flat, two-dimensional images. But the reality of Marsh Farm is massive. We are talking acres and acres of rows running in every direction, and they vary from like blue-purple to pink-purple to this really deep violet.
And it's not just visual, right? It's the sound, too.
The sound is overwhelming. The fields are absolutely full of bees, but it doesn't sound like individual insects buzzing around. The accumulated vibration makes the entire field sound like it's physically breathing.
Yeah, the human brain really struggles to process novel, massive-scale sensory input like that. Ivy is experiencing an environment that just imposes itself on her nervous system.
Can't even imagine.
I mean, even the scent of a commercial lavender farm in June, it isn't some delicate fragrance.
Right.
The air carries the scent the way it carries humidity. It has actual weight. It is a physical presence that triggers this involuntary physiological response.
So faced with this overwhelming physical reality, Ivy leans on literally the only tool she has, which is her architectural training. She tries to draw her way into understanding the place.
Which makes sense. That's her comfort zone.
Right. She sits with her sketchbook, mapping out all the drainage channels. She paces the rows to measure their length. She goes into the study and dives into her aunt's heavily annotated cultivation books, trying to just logically decode the farm.
She wants a blueprint.
Exactly. But to me, this feels like trying to read a textbook to learn how to swim. You can memorize the stroke mechanics and you can calculate water displacement on a chalkboard all day long, but until you jump in and feel the freezing water actually shock your system, you don't actually know anything about swimming.
That is a perfect analogy. And the agricultural equivalent of that, textbook theory versus physical reality is perfectly captured in the aunt's cultivation books.
Oh, the margin notes.
Yeah. Ivy finds printed text offering these broad general rules about when to harvest lavender. But her aunt's handwritten margin notes contradict the printed text entirely.
Which is wild.
It is. The notes are fiercely observational and specific to the exact microclimate of that Norfolk soil.
I found one of those margin notes so fascinating, but I really need you to explain it to me. Her aunt wrote, watch the calices, not the corollas.
Right, the botany of it.
Yeah, because as someone who has literally never farmed a day in my life, I don't know what that means. Why is an architect trying to map a farm suddenly obsessing over these tiny botanical terms?
Well, the botany here is actually the key to the entire operation. The corolla is the collection of petals, the purple part of the flower that we all associate with lavender.
Okay, the pretty part.
Exactly. A textbook might tell you to harvest when the field looks the most vibrant purple, when the corollas are in full bloom. But the aunt's note tells her to ignore the petals entirely. Instead, she needs to look at the calyx.
And what exactly is that?
The calyx is the small, green, cup-like structure at the base of the flower.
Wait, so the tiny green cup is more important than the actual purple flower?
For a lavender farmer, absolutely. The essential oil, which is the actual valuable product of the farm, is primarily stored in tiny glandular trichomes located on that green calyx.
Oh.
Yeah, so if you wait for the purple petals to look finished or picture perfect, like the textbook suggests, the plant has actually already expended its energy.
So it's too late.
Right, much of the volatile oil in the calyx has begun to evaporate or degrade by that point. The ant is leaving behind this critical lesson that true expertise doesn't come from memorizing a generalized theory.
It comes from the actual physical thing.
Yes, from testing that theory against the physical, biological reality right in front of you. Ivy has to learn to stop looking at the farm as a blueprint and start looking at the microscopic reality of those green cups.
And that methodical, hyper-focused approach is what leads Ivy back into her aunt's study, going through 40 years of harvest ledgers. And going through those ledgers highlights a glaring anomaly, like a literal blank spot on the map of the farm.
Which is usually where things get interesting. Anomalies in meticulously kept data are, well, they're usually where the most important discoveries happen.
Definitely. So while Ivy is out physically walking the 22 harvestable rows to learn the geography, she stops at row 17. She stops because the biology of the plant is it's different.
In what way?
The lavender in this row is noticeably darker. The spikes are shorter. There are way fewer bees working it compared to the rest of the field. And the smell is distinct.
Like a different variety.
Yeah, it has a sweet surface, but beneath that is an earthy, deep, almost resinous layer. And the wooden label at the end of the row is completely blank, washed away by the weather over the years.
So it stands out as an irregularity in an environment where, uniformity is usually the primary goal of commercial agriculture.
Exactly. So she goes to the harvest ledgers to figure out what variety it is. She pulls out decades of compressed data like dates, row numbers, yields in kilograms, oil volume in milliliters. She cross-references the rows.
And what does she find?
Nothing. Row 17 is entirely missing from the harvest data. Year after year, decade after decade, it is never cut. The only mention of it is on an old hand-drawn field map at the front of a notebook.
What does the map say?
It simply says the remembrance row, not harvested. No variety named, no origin, just the fact of its existence and the fact that it's intentionally left alone.
Wow. The absence of data is in itself a very loud piece of data.
It is.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because from a modern efficiency standpoint, I have to challenge the logic of this.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
Well, a farm is a business. Its entire operating premise is production. It exists to turn a living thing into an extracted product, lavender into oil to bottle and sell.
Oh, wait, that's the whole point of a commercial farm.
So in a purely capitalist, spreadsheet-driven sense, 112 paces of unharvested, prime agricultural land is just wasted space. 40 years of soil nutrients, water, sunlight, and physical real estate going toward a row that yields 0 milliliters of product to sell. It defies all conventional business logic.
I'd strongly push back on that definition of wasted space, though, especially when we look at it through the lens of modern agricultural science and systems thinking.
How so?
Well, when we use linear, spreadsheet-driven logic, we assume that value A comes directly from plant A. But an ecosystem doesn't work like a spreadsheet at all.
It's more interconnected.
Exactly. Modern agriculture is increasingly recognizing that unharvested buffer zones, hedgerows, and wild margins, areas that produce zero commercial yield, are actually the structural integrity of the farm.
Really? So they aren't just sitting there doing nothing?
Not at all. They harbor predatory insects that control pests, they prevent soil erosion, they maintain moisture reservoirs, and they support these incredibly complex fungal networks. By choosing not to harvest row 17, the ant is making a deliberate choice.
So it's not just sentimental.
Right. She is deciding that the being of the plant serves a purpose that completely supersedes its extraction.
She is protecting a space from the demands of production. I love that. But Ivy still wants to know the actual why behind this specific row. Since the ledgers offer no answers, she looks to the hidden, private artifacts her aunt left behind.
The personal stuff.
Yeah, and she finds 2 massive clues that help her understand what this row means. And more importantly, they unlock the sheer, terrifying power of human scent.
That makes sense. The official ledgers document the mechanics of the business, but these hidden artifacts document the mechanics of the human mind.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. So the first clue is hidden inside a botanical classification book in the study. An old yellowed envelope falls out. On the back, Her aunt has written the word later.
Cryptic.
Very. Inside is a letter from someone signing their first name with the word love. The letter discusses sending old cuttings from an unknown grandmother's garden and contains this incredible instruction.
What does it say?
It says there's no need to do anything with it except let it grow. It is enough to grow.
Oh, wow. So those cuttings are the genetic origin of row 17.
Exactly.
It isn't a commercially sourced, high-yield cultivar created in a lab somewhere. It is a lineage, a biological tether to a specific past, transported and rooted right there in Norfolk soil.
And the second clue is found out at the distilling shed, which is this stone building deeply saturated with the smell of decades of concentrated lavender oil. Behind the massive copper still, hidden in a recessed stone shelf, sits a single, half-empty, dark glass bottle.
Let me guess. No label.
Well, the label doesn't have a date or a row number. It just says, for remembering.
Ah, the remembrance row.
Exactly. It is the culmination of row 17. The aunt did distill it, perhaps just once, not to sell, but to capture it.
And distilling an essential oil is essentially the act of capturing a plant's chemical language in a liquid form.
Right. And when Ivy pulls the cork on that dark glass bottle, it doesn't give her a specific Polaroid picture of a memory. It doesn't conjure a face or a date on a calendar. It gives her an atmosphere.
A feeling rather than an image.
Yes, the scent hits her, and she instantly feels this deep, heavy sense of being very small, very warm, and very safe in some specific childhood summer. She cannot pinpoint the exact garden, but the physical sensation is completely overwhelming. I've always thought of scent as a direct VIP elevator to the brain's emotional center.
A VIP elevator.
Yeah, it completely bypasses the lobby of logic. You don't get to think about the smell, you're just suddenly dropped into a feeling.
That VIP elevator analogy is incredibly scientifically accurate, actually, and the anatomical mechanism behind it is fascinating.
Oh, please explain it.
So when you look, listen, or touch something, that sensory data travels to the thalamus. The thalamus acts like a switchboard or a logic gate in the brain, processing the information and then routing it to the appropriate cortex.
At the sorting facility.
Exactly. It introduces a microsecond of logical filtering. But smell does not do this. Olfactory processing completely bypasses the thalamus.
Wait, really? It just skips it?
It skips it entirely. The olfactory bulb has direct, unmediated neural pathways to the amygdala, which processes emotion, and the hippocampus, which manages associative learning and memory.
So it literally has a biological fast lane.
Precisely. From an evolutionary standpoint, early mammals needed to instantly detect chemical signals in their environment, like the scent of a predator, fire, or spoiled food.
Right. You don't want to think about fire, you just want to run.
Exactly. They needed to trigger an immediate behavioral response before higher-level visual or auditory processing could even occur. Because the olfactory bulb is wired directly into the brain's emotional and memory centers, a scent doesn't retrieve a visual file like a photograph.
It retrieves the feeling.
Right, it retrieves the physiological and emotional state you were in when you first encountered that chemical signature. That is why Ivy feels the warmth and the safety in her body before her conscious mind can even attempt to name the memory.
That makes the aunt's decision of where to hide the bottle even more profound. I mean, she captured this deep, resinous, emotional atmosphere in a bottle, but she didn't bury it in the yard or lock it in a safe in the house.
She put it in the shed.
She put it on a hidden shelf right behind the copper still.
Yeah.
She placed it in a working space behind the actual machinery of the farm, where you would only ever find it if you were intimately involved in the physical labor of the harvest.
It is an exercise in trusting the future. The aunt trusted that eventually someone would come along, do the grueling work, pay attention to the environment, and uncover the mechanism of the farm for themselves.
And to truly uncover that mechanism, to solve the mystery of row 17, Ivy realizes she has to actually participate in the physical extraction.
The harvest.
Yes. The harvest arrives, and the transition from theory to practice becomes absolute. Ellen, this elderly village woman who has worked this land for years, arrives with a canvas roll of sickles.
Hand harvesting. That is serious labor.
Oh, it is. Ivy's thrown into the grueling, rhythmic art of cutting lavender by hand. You sweep the sickle just above the woody base, gathering the stems, building the bundle in your left hand. Her arms ache, the sun is brutal, and the sensory landscape of the farm radically shifts.
Harvesting fundamentally changes the chemistry of the air.
It really does. The smell goes through that heavy, warm, floral, ambient lavender to something sharp, green, and intense. Every time they sever a stem, it releases concentrated volatile compounds directly into the air.
It's the defense mechanism of the plant.
Yeah, it's the sharp smell of a living thing being cut down. So Ivy takes these bundles into the shed and finally fires up the copper still.
Which is an incredible process. The distillation process itself is just a masterclass in applied chemistry.
How does it actually work?
Well, steam distillation relies on the fact that these essential oils are volatile, meaning they evaporate easily, but they are also hydrophobic, meaning they repel water.
Okay, oil and water don't mix.
Right. By forcing pressurized steam through the packed lavender stems, the heat causes the glandular trichomes on those green calyces to burst.
So the steam is literally breaking the plant apart at a microscopic level.
Yes. The steam vaporizes the essential oils, carrying those aromatic molecules upwards. This vapor is then pushed through a condenser coil, which is basically a long tube surrounded by cold water.
To cool it back down.
Exactly. The rapid drop in temperature forces the vapor to condense back into a liquid. Because the essential oil is hydrophobic and less dense than the water, it floats on top of the floral water, or hydrosol, making it easy to separate and siphon off. Ivy is basically operating a 19th century phase change machine.
That is so cool. So she manages the temperature, washes the condenser coil, and successfully produces her first distillation. It's this beautiful, slightly green gold oil. She labels it in her own handwriting, officially entering the farm's history.
A huge milestone for her.
Definitely. But amidst this exhausting labor, she reads her aunt's final notebook entry. It's an entry about row 19.
Okay, wait, row 19, not 17.
Right. Now, row 19 sits directly next to row 17. They share a path. For 40 years, the ledgers have noted that row 19 consistently produces the most complex oil on the entire farm.
Interesting.
The aunt wrote for years that she didn't know why, she just accepted it. But in the final entry, she writes this revelation. She says, some things work because of what is beside them.
This is the shift from linear thinking to systems thinking.
So what does this all mean? This blows the whole thing wide open for Ivy. Row 17, the unharvested remembrance row with the shorter spikes and the earthy scent, wasn't just taking up space.
It was working.
It was actively altering the row next to it over 4 decades. It made row 19's oil the most valuable on the farm purely by being beside it. But as a non-scientist, I have to ask you how. I mean, they aren't physically touching above ground. How does a plant alter the chemical makeup of the plant in the next row?
There are a few invisible, highly complex mechanisms at play here, and this is where agricultural science becomes genuinely awe-inspiring. The first is underground.
Okay, in the roots.
Right. Plants are connected by mycorrhizal fungal networks. These fungi attach to the root systems of the plants, creating this massive subterranean highway.
Like an underground internet.
Exactly like that. A plant that is undisturbed, like the unharvested row 17, develops a deep, robust root system and a highly mature fungal network. It can actually siphon excess water, carbon, and nutrients through this fungal network and shuttle it to adjacent plants that might be experiencing stress.
Stress like being harvested.
Yes, like row 19, which is traumatized by being chopped down every single year.
So row 17 is acting like an underground battery pack for the harvested row.
That is exactly what it is doing. It provides systemic resilience.
Yeah.
And the second mechanism happens above ground through volatile organic compounds, or VOCs.
That's scent chemical.
Right, plants communicate chemically. Row 17, with its unique, earthy, resinous lineage, is constantly releasing a specific profile of VOCs into the air. These airborne chemicals can do 2 things. First, they can act as an olfactory camouflage, masking row 19 from specific pests that would otherwise damage the crop.
Oh, wow. So it's a shield.
Yep. Second, the constant exposure to the aromatic compounds of a slightly different species can trigger a mild beneficial stress response in row 19.
Wait, a stress response makes the oil better?
Yes, it really does.
Okay.
Essential oils are technically secondary metabolites. Plants don't produce them for primary growth. They produce them for defense, attraction, and environmental adaptation. When a plant is mildly stressed or chemically stimulated by a neighbor, it ramps up the production of these complex metabolites. So the biological presence of row 17 is fundamentally rewriting the chemical output of row 19.
That completely reframes my earlier argument about wasted space. I mean, if Ivy had looked at the spreadsheet, seen that row 17 produced 0 revenue, and ripped it up to plant a high-yield variety, she would have unwittingly destroyed the invisible synergy that created the farm's most valuable product.
Which happens all the time in modern farming. Linear thinking says, remove the non-producing asset to maximize efficiency.
But systems thinking.
Systems thinking says, observe the relationships between the assets before you alter the ecosystem. The ant understood that the farm was a web of relationships, not just a collection of isolated variables.
And this realization is the catalyst for Ivy's final decision. She decides she isn't just staying for the summer. She's staying for the year and likely long after.
She's a farmer now.
She is. She realizes her inheritance isn't a deed to a piece of property. Her inheritance is a practice. It is the daily practice of physical presence, sensory attention, noting what happens, and accepting that you will not always understand the mechanical workings of every single thing in your environment. She decides to keep row 17 exactly as it is.
Unharvested.
Unharvested, unexplained, just growing.
She absorbs the most difficult lesson of all, I think. We do not always need to extract measurable value from every element in our lives for our lives to be rich.
Right.
Allowing a space, a habit, or a relationship to exist simply for its own sake is often the very thing that provides a structural integrity for everything else to flourish.
We have journeyed a long way with Ivy Weston today. We started with the sheer overwhelming reality of bottom-up sensory processing.
We learned how the physical biology of a plant dictates agricultural truth over theoretical textbooks.
We explored the deep, unmediated neuroscience of the olfactory bulb and how scent retrieves emotion before logic can even get out of bed.
And finally, we uncovered the hidden mechanisms of systems thinking, where underground networks and invisible chemical dialogues prove that proximity really does matter.
It totally challenges the very metrics we use to measure productivity and worth.
It definitely challenges mine.
Same here. And we want to leave you, the listener, with a question to mull over as you step back into your own structured routines.
Think about your own ecosystem.
Look at your life, your calendar, or the environment you operate in every single day. What is your row 17? What is the practice, the block of time, or the relationship that you keep around? Not because it produces a measurable, profitable output on a spreadsheet, but simply because its presence creates the invisible synergy that makes everything beside it infinitely better.